In this video, we're going to continue our exploration of color theory, and we're going to use a practical application of it. I want to do a drawing of an apple, which is basically a fairly simple, more or less round shape, spherical shape. And the object of the exercise is going to be to produce something that recreates that three-dimensional spherical shape. And we're going to do that using warm and cool colors. I'll walk you through from the beginning of the outline drawing to the finishing of the painting. Hope you enjoy it. So this is the photograph we're going to use as a reference, and we're going to try and recreate the apple. So here I am doing the preliminary drawing. It's just done in a normal graphite pencil. I'm using a mechanical pencil. Here I'm beginning to fill in the base color, which is Prismacolor. It's number 923, a Scarlet Lake. It's a cool red. We want the cool red to be on the bottom. Now I'm adding yellow to the side that's closer to the light. It's also where if you go back to the reference photo, there's sort of an orange tone to that side of the apple. Now I'm adding in the Color Soft 120. Now the orange on top of the yellow side. These are the warm colors, obviously. And now I'm adding the chrome yellow and then just cleaning up things a little. Now let's bring up the stem, just make the drawing look a little more complete, keep everything in perspective. Okay, now here I'm just working more with the reds. That's the Color Soft. That's the warmer red. And you'll notice it appears warm to the left of the highlight. Here I'm adding cool colors. I'm adding some Derwent Studio Indigo. It's number 36. I'm also using some Cedar Green. That's another Derwent Studio pencil. That's number 50. And as we talked about in earlier videos, the green is the complement of the red that cools it down and gives us some rounded effect. The shadow is done with indigo blue to start. Here I'm just touching up some finishing bits to bring this a little closer to finished. This is with the Color Soft Red, number 120. And I'm just filling in some of the areas to make this look a little bit more like our reference apple. If you're really picky and you look closely, you'll notice my drawing. I made the right side of the apple a little too thin. It's not quite as rounded as our reference apple. So here we're just adding some extra color. You'll notice I turn the drawing frequently just to eliminate any directionality in the strokes that you see. I'm trying to create an even tonal effect. It's important to get all the little details, fill in as much as you want, make it look the way you want it to. I've still got a little too much reflected light on the bottom of the apple. I'll tone that down here shortly, because it would be in shadow as well. But as I say, there would be reflected light from the white surface it's sitting on. And I'll keep adding with the Color Soft 120 to just complete the orange tones. Now I'm going to clean up the edge a little bit, the edge of the apple. Here I'm working more on the shadow, darken the shadow down a little bit. This is being done with the indigo pencil, and I'll just even things out a little bit so it's not quite so much white showing through. Make it look a little more natural. These are a few, I haven't gone to time-lapse on this. I've just clipped a few sections together to make it look a little more complete, a little faster. Now, momentarily, I'm going to add some other colors into the shadow. I'll be adding some some of the red, because you'd have reflected light from the apple itself reflected down into the shadow. As well, I'll add some green for the reasons we discussed in earlier videos. It just makes it more realistic, makes it more colorful. I'll also be adding some of the Tuscan Red. That's Prismacolor number 937. That'll be on the shadow, the body shadow on the apple, as well as the cast shadow from the apple. And that's a cool red. Here's our reference to see how we did in comparison. Just see what needs to be touched up. A little bit of time lapse there for you. Now we'll tone down the highlight down to a more reasonable size. I'm doing that with the orange, which is a polychromos as well. It's cadmium orange, number 111. I'll actually go lightly over the highlight with the yellow pencil here in a second, and just work it down to the size we want, tone it down just a little bit. Okay, now I'm adding some indigo to the bottom. You can see how the shadow now, it starts to move away from you. Creates a rounded effect. I'll throw some Derwent Studio number 54, which burnt umber, which is a dark brown, into the shadow area as well on the body of the apple, because it's a dark orange, basically, dark brown, dark yellow. Here I am with the 937 Tuscan Red. Again, just cleaning up the edge and cooling down that side of the apple to make it, again, move away from you. Here I am with the burnt umber. Some of that will go into the cast shadow as well, just to neutralize it, so it's not, you don't want it blue, but it's sort of a blue-gray typically. A little bit of green in it, there'll be the reflected red. Here I'm adding some burnt umber, that's Derwent Studio 54, into the cast shadow area. This will help gray things down a little bit. Just do a little more work on the shadow, get it to the value that I want. Here I'm using the Prismacolor 937 again. This is just adding some color and toning down the cast shadow. And now I'm going to add some of the Prismacolor 923, the Scarlet Lake we started with. This is to give some reflected color to the shadow. And this, it just evens it out, gives it a very natural look. It's very important to do in your shadows. I'll also add some cedar green. Again, as we talked about in our earlier videos on color theory, you're going to use the complementary colors in the shadow areas. We used it on the body shadow, and now we're using it in the cast shadow as well. And again, this will give us a colorful, lively shadow that's full of light and color. Here I am edging, cleaning up the edges of the apple. This is being done with the Prismacolor 937, also with some indigo, depending on where we are on the edge. This is the 937 Tuscan Red, and you can see how it just tightens up that edge. Now I'll clean off a few spots. That one's been annoying me for a while. This is a eraser shield that I'm using along with my kneaded eraser. We'll talk about the eraser shield. It's a very handy piece of equipment. We'll talk about that in the next video on equipment that you can purchase that you might want to have on hand. Very useful tool. Now I'm going to clean up the shadow area of the stem. I'm using a color soft pencil. This would be the lichen green again, and then I'll add probably some cedar green to it, and I'll also use some of the Tuscan Red and the indigo indigo 36, just to get the proper cast shadow. The cat doesn't seem to want me to do this, protesting here in the background. You can see with the oranges and the yellows on the side nearest you that the apple really becomes three-dimensional. The warm colors are coming towards you, the cooler colors are receding, so it gives you that rounded effect. The cast shadow, of course, gives it some reality. And we're just putting a few finishing touches, making sure that the yellowy area is toned down a little bit. There's a little too much yellow there. This again is with the Prismacolor Scarlet Lake number 923. I always track the colors I use when I'm doing a painting or drawing. That way, if it gets set aside for a little bit of time, when I come back to it, I know what colors I started with. I'm not guessing, because sometimes you'll look at it and you'll think, oh, I used this red, and you start to use it and it's wrong, and you've got to pull it out. So it's always a good idea, and you'll see a little later I have the list of all my colors. Okay, a little more red in the shadows. It's important to get the reflected light. And if you can't see it, just give it time. Keep looking. It took me a very long time to see shadows on things, and to learn to see the color in shadows. And it's time to sign it. Here's the finished drawing, and back to our reference for comparison. These are the pencils I used, and as just mentioned earlier, here is the sample. I hope you found the information in this video helpful. If you did, a like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated. If you have any suggestions or comments on videos you'd like to see, or questions you have regarding colored pencil or colored theory, I'd be happy to deal with them in another video. Just leave a comment below, or you can reach out to me at the email below. In the next video, we'll be looking at what basic equipment do you need to get started. If you're looking at setting up a home studio, what else do you need? Look forward to seeing you soon.